ACL is alive and well throughout the district. We took some time to sit down with our teachers of all grade levels to hear what they said about implementing ACL. Thank you guys for taking time to come in and talk about your experiences and your work with our students in your classrooms with ACL. So I'd like to just kind of ask you some questions about, one, what you've been doing with ACL, and eventually have us talk about some barriers. So can you guys talk a little bit about how you're using ACL in the classroom?
In my classroom, I would say that we are doing a lot of formative assessment. I would say that that's a daily kind of continuous thing, something as informal as thumbs up or thumbs down, or we also use games a lot as formative assessments, and then we can take screenshots of our scores and upload to Google Classroom. So I feel like we're doing pretty well in the formative assessment regard. I would say that's my big thing that we do.
For me, I've slowly started implementing this since we teach all of the content. So I seem to use it the most in math and in writing. These are some things I use: thumbs up, need more practice, need more help. So they can have these at their seats and use those, and I can walk around. I have targets posted, success criterias, trying to verbally say that to the students and have them repeat it. But that's kind of where I am in my classroom.
And I, as well, as along the same lines with Mrs. Posada, I feel like I've been doing a good job of visually displaying them in my classroom, and from time to time, communicating it with the students and stuff, and them being aware of like what that target means at the top and what the checklist is for success criteria. I will say, with having the new literacy curriculum in our building, that it's kind of ACL's taken a little bit of a shift, taken a little bit of a backseat. But the nice thing I know Becky and I were talking about today, that our new curriculum does implement a lot of that into the curriculum on a daily basis already, where we are starting the lesson and saying this is what we're going to be practicing today or going over. And as well as Becky also said, math. I feel like I use that quite a bit when I'm beginning my lesson in math as well.
Yeah, and it's a math classroom in here, so a lot of the same things as these teachers. We have a lot of variations of formative assessments and strategies. The big example we had today, we just took our 3rd star math test. So we have binders in the back, and all of our kids have a tracking sheet, so they're able to track where they are currently at. They have goals on there of where they want to get to, and it really generates some excitement and some disappointment a little bit when kids aren't seeing the growth that they want to. So tracking systems in their binders has been a big thing for us here of late.
All right, well, thank you for sharing how you're currently using some of the components of Part 1 of ACL. And with that, we know we're talking about our success criteria to go along with our learning targets, those formative assessments to check to see if our students are, understanding or, get what we're doing. So it's great to hear some of those formative checks that you guys are doing with thumbs up, thumbs down, some checklists, and just flat out asking our kids, hey, do you understand what we're doing? So it's great that you guys are doing those. Another key component with Part 1 is using good and bad examples of student work, whether it's in a kind of evaluating it to see, hey, what are some good things about this? What are some not so good things about this? And having some conversation. Are you guys doing any of that with good and bad examples?
I would say in my classroom that might look like taking a video, or maybe looking at a video. I know we want it to be our students' work, but in my classroom, I think video is the best way to assess performance. And so, we've got to be careful with permissions. So sometimes we'll use other examples from YouTube, or sometimes with a student's permission, I'll use themselves as an example and film it maybe outside of class, and then let them be an example to other students, and it's more than likely a good example. And then I try to use maybe things from outside of class for bad examples. I don't know of any student that wants to be shown on video as a bad example, so that's a little bit more of a challenge, but that's kind of how we do student work and using video for that in my classroom.
In my classroom, I think I use this the most with handwriting, using good examples and examples that how we don't want to write the letters since we're working so hard on letter formation. So I'm hoping to copy and keep samples of current students. So next year I can use those as well. Like she said, we don't want to, nobody wants to be the bad example in the class. So if I could use past students for that. And I think I use it a lot in writing as well, different samples, and they can see a student's work rather than just my own. So they know, oh, it can look like this too.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad I go after you because I get to copy everything she says because we both teach kindergarten, but I pretty much do the same exact thing. There is a big emphasis on the different strokes we use for letter formation. So a lot of times, like today we did J, making sure we're going down and hooking on a line, and don't forget that dot. Just showing the different examples of where it should be at on formation on the lines and those kinds of things. And every once in a while I do pull a student and, and I don't criticize them for it, but okay, let's take a look at this. What can we do better to make this look like the way it's supposed to? And as well as when we're writing sentences and writing a good sentence and details in our pictures and those kinds of things that we use as examples.
Yeah, we've gotten comfortable in here with, just from day one, we told them you're going to have to work together. So we do a lot of variations of partner work, small group work, where they're maybe not just checking their work or their answers, but just going through a problem in a step-by-step process. So I feel like they get to see a lot of different variations of each other and how they work. And more than anything, it took me some time is just being comfortable with mistakes. Especially in math classroom, we celebrate mistakes in here. So if a kid makes an error, we're like, no, it's okay. And then we get to break it down together and figure out where it's at. So a few of the barriers in there that we've had to get through, but they get to see a lot of each other's work throughout the process.
And seeing some of these good examples and bad examples can really go a long way in helping our students not only with understanding what we're doing, but also seeing what path they'll need to take in some future parts with ACL. So it's great to hear those examples that you guys are doing. Thanks for sharing those. We know with assessment capable learners, we're not looking for an end product. We know this is a journey and a process together where we know for quite the foreseeable future, we're going to be working with our staff along this journey, providing some support. We've talked about and heard some success stories or some successes that you guys have shared on what you're doing. There also may be some barriers or some things that maybe where we get caught. Could you guys share maybe a barrier and how you've worked to overcome in working with your students with ACL?
I know this sounds really basic, but this is easy for me, and I've spoken with the art teacher in my building, and she has the same struggle. Just due to the physical setup of my classroom, I'm finding it difficult to express my learning targets visually where the kids can see them the whole time. I tend to express my learning targets verbally really consistently, and then I'll show them on the smart board, but then they don't remain there for the kids to see the whole time because I don't have a whiteboard where the learning targets could be displayed for the whole class. So that is a very basic barrier for mine. Also, our music and also visual art standards have changed in the last year and two, and they're still kind of in the process of that. So that's been a bit of a barrier as well because it's kind of, although the standards are similar, they're organized completely differently. So we're working through that as well.
I'd say my biggest barrier, like I said before, is implementing this in all the content areas. I feel like I'm strong in some of the areas, but one step at a time. And another thing is in kindergarten, 5-year-olds, it's hard to have them repeat all of these and not making it too complex and too complicated for them to restate. So working on that, on some of the targets and success criteria.
And I think a big word that's been used even in DLT, BLT, TBTs is just being intentional about it. I guess that's where I struggle the most is, I have it displayed up there and I do it all for myself. But then a lot of times when I'm getting my lesson going, I don't always, that's not the first thing I think of. And I think a lot of times I unintentionally kind of do some of those things, but I don't physically go up to my board and say, okay, this is our target for today. What are those pictures showing that we should be able to do when we're done? What do we need to and so being more intentional with actually using my display in my room, because I am able to have a display in my room. So
I think in here it's just been the same thing as you're saying for the whole district. Like, I think for a while everybody was trying to do the same thing, and from kindergarten to high school literature to whatever, there's just a lot of different ways. So in here it's the same thing of what's going to work for us. You know, we tried to post in different ways, but I think just running through the process of how is this going to benefit us to benefit our kids. So just breaking down some of those own walls in here of what works for us and what works for everybody in the district. You know, what works in here is not going to work for somebody in high school or going to work down at the kindergarten level. It's just not going to work. So I think that whole thing was just getting comfortable and just understanding it's a long process.
Yeah, we do know this is a process, and we're not asking our teachers to be robots and for everything to look the same. Just as our kids all bring something different to the table, all of you guys do as well. So it's great to hear some of the successes that you're having, but also the barriers and how you're looking to overcome them. Thank you for your continued work with ACL. We know that your plates are very busy, and we appreciate what you're willing to do and share. Thanks. I'm over here at the high school with Mr. Braun. And Mr. Braun, can you tell us a little bit about how you use ACL in the classroom?
In my classroom, Vaughn, we have our learning targets and our success criteria. And what I do is before we start on our, and it can be either on the smart board, a PowerPoint presentation, but we always start off with going over number one, the learning target, and that's on the board. We talk a little bit about it, and then we go on to the success criteria.
Okay. And you have a conversation with your students about what's up on the smart board. You talk to your students about, hey, this is our learning target for the day. Here's our success criteria and how we're going to work to meet that target.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think at the high school level that is a bit of a challenge for me, is because we might have the same learning target for 5 days. We could have it for 2 weeks. You know, for instance, we're talking about the mole right now. So our learning target is to describe how the mole is used in chemistry. Now, we can go, and do that, but we repeat that, for 2 weeks. So what I think is more valuable for us at my level, and at least in my classes, are the success criteria. Okay? What do we need to put together to achieve learning to know how the mole is used in chemistry? And what I mean by that is we have our success criteria for this particular lesson plan was to identify that the mole was the amount of a substance, but also dealing with Avogadro's number and how Avogadro's number relates to the moles. Then maybe the next lesson is going to be taking the mole and relating it to the masses on the periodic table, which would be the success criteria. And then taking the mole and relating it to the volume of a gas. So we use the same learning target, but the way I focus on is getting that success criteria.
Okay. So you mentioned how you use success criteria and learning targets. Do you guys talk about good and bad examples?
What I usually do with good and bad examples is, I'm a seasoned veteran. I've been teaching chemistry a good deal of time, and I know where the kids are going to make their mistakes at. So when we get to a particular part, let's say we did empirical and molecular formula the other day, I said, now this is the step right here that most students struggle with. So this is where you're going to forget it and do it wrong. So don't do it like that. And then we took a quiz today, and when we went over the quiz, some of the kids even said, you told me, Mr. Braun, I was going to do it wrong right here, and that's exactly what I did.
Now, when it comes to implementing ACL, there's got to be some barriers. Can you talk a little bit about a barrier that maybe you've overcome and what you did to overcome it?
I think one of the biggest barriers that I've had is just getting the kids to buy into it. They haven't been doing this ACL for very long. We went into the I can statements before this, which to me I think they were very similar to my success criteria. But the kids, getting them to buy into the whole, this is what I'm going to be learning. I think they struggle a little bit like that, and they understand, and they say, why are we doing this? Why don't we just go on with the lesson? So basically, I guess it's just when we're telling them what they're going to learn, they're questioning, well, why did you need to tell me that?
So, and we know it's important for our students to know, as we move further in our process, that this is how we get there. This is our target. These are the steps and the journey that we're going to take to help you be successful. And we know the further we move along with ACL, the more years that we implement this, the better that our staff's going to be with helping our students with ACL, but also our students are going to be further and further along with their learning with ACL as well. As we close our new learning on Part 1 of ACL, we'll continue to practice that in our daily lessons. Next, we have a chance to begin a new chapter with Part 2, where we get a chance to learn to build and design relationships with our students so that we can provide them appropriate feedback. As we go through this journey together, we must remember, together we will.